This fall and winter, I've been building an addition on my dad's shop, and during that I decided that I needed to get an actual new corded SkilSaw. I have been using this one, but as you can imagine, in the wintertime, this handle is a bit cold. It's really, even with gloves on, like unless they're thick gloves, it just sucks the heat right out of your hands. Now, if you watch my other videos, you know that I also have a bunch of Ryobi cordless stuff, which is fine, but the batteries really cut down a lot on power in the cold weather. So the battery saws aren't great in the cold, a metal handle isn't great in the cold, so I decided, fine, I will go with a new modern circular saw with a plastic handle, and yeah. So I went with the SkilSaw brand, partially because I like the way it looks, and also I like the way the ergonomics look like they would be. Looks like the handle here is offset to the side, so you have a good sight line down to the blade, which you do, so you don't have to look around to the far side. You can look right through there and see where you're cutting, so it's great for cross cuts. I like that it had a metal housing and nice magnesium base. And yeah, so what do I think about this? I've used this saw a little bit. It feels like they came really close to making a good saw, but missed in a couple of areas. I feel like they didn't do enough product testing. Like, one thing is like the dust chute. I can cut into a demo, but it doesn't work unless you're cutting fast and you're pushing a lot of sawdust. Then it comes out the chute. If you cut slow, it comes out somewhere here in the middle and sprays all over the place. I don't know why the physics are like that, but my dad has a couple of other SkilSaws and they all come out nicely out the chute no matter how fast you cut. So something is weird with the physics and design of this. The lock here is a little bit clumsy to get off when it's down behind. Not too terrible. The trigger is like really square. It's hard to see probably, but it's got really square edges. So it's not like it's gonna kill you, but you know, it's not that comfortable compared to, well, there's trigger on my Ryobi, trigger on the Black & Decker. These all have nice chamfer corners and whatever else. So they're easier in the hands. What other oddities about this? Oh yeah. Also, might not look it on camera, but the trigger hole is really pretty small. Now, I don't have terribly large fingers and it fits in fine without anything on your hand, but if you're wearing gloves, your finger doesn't fit in the trigger hole very well. So it's like they took this handle design from their worm drive saw and just stuffed it on here with no real consideration to the fact that they made it much smaller here. So if you're wearing a glove, it doesn't, you know, your finger doesn't stuff in there very well. One thing I'm not thrilled about is this handle is just ABS plastic. Now, it is just a handle and it's replaceable, so that's good. You know, you'd like to see the glass fiber reinforced for the higher end tools, but I understand that this has a nice magnesium housing and magnesium blade guard and magnesium deck, and those are more important to be solid and, you know, nice and rigid than the handle. And the handle is replaceable, so if you do something stupid to this saw and you break the handle, as long as the casing is okay, you can get a new one of these for like 20 bucks or 15 bucks or whatever. Whereas if you had the handle all molded into the saw housing all in one unit, you break this, you know, then you gotta get a whole new saw. So yeah, overall this is a pretty nice saw. I also like, the other feature I like on this is it has this little thing here to catch if you're doing a narrow piece, because if you're, for like this saw, when you raise it up, if you're doing a thin thing, it can drop back down again and then get bound up. And this doesn't do that because it has that nice little thingy there. So the ergonomics of this saw are pretty decent. I also took it apart and looked at the insides. I'll splice in some clips of that because I was comparing it to one of my older SkilSaws. And the insides are pretty decent. They got good bearings in there, nice beefy armature that's, you know, all lacquered up, and it's got you know, real metal gears and that sort of stuff. So it seems like it's a pretty high quality saw inside. I got the rotor out of my SkilSaw. See, it also has a metal fan, nice metal blades, bearings front and back, slightly smaller bearings than the old saw. It has, this is the Black & Decker rotor. This one's is also all lacquered up, all the windings, but they skipped the thread winding down at the base here. Metal fan, this has a bigger gear here, and this gear here is also bigger, so it should, I am curious if the gear ratio is the same. So in here we have, oh, there's an O-ring to seal for that bearing. Here you can see there's some grease leaking out around this shaft. This is actually the motor, the blade shaft. Looks like, looking in there, there's a bearing in there too. Don't think I'm going to take this gearbox apart. There's not much to see in there. There's a single gear, which is almost definitely a powdered metal gear, and some grease. It requires taking off the whole blade guard and messing with springs and whatever else and funny clips. So, yeah. This is the blade lock. It goes into one of those nice grooves built in, so it's not locking against something like the gear teeth, like some of the things do. It has its own dedicated spot to lock into, which is good. As far as rotor size, the Black & Decker is longer. This one's fatter. I think overall the Black & Decker is bigger. They're both rated for, well, this one's rated for 10 amps and this one's rated for 15. Whether or not the amps actually mean anything for these saws, who knows. Inside the handle is a big fat switch. Seems like a good heavy duty switch. It's actually about the same size as the other one. I don't have the other one taken apart, but it's a similar size switch. This handle is not bad, but it's also like, you can kind of tell it's designed on a computer. And this one was sculpted by like a guy who sculpted the mold. I don't know how exactly they made the mold for this, but it was made by hand. I mean, nobody drew anything on a computer designed in 1950. So this actually feels really nice in the hand. This one isn't bad. I'll put the saw back together, do a more complete review, but I really wanted to compare the two saws' internals. So the SkilSaw is actually pretty darn good. For Skill kind of getting a bad rap for not being, for a while they were having some difficulty making good products, particularly in their sidewinder saws. Like this SkilSaw circular saw is pretty bad. So I might take that apart, but ergonomically this is pretty darn bad. I might take this apart and try what's inside, but there are a couple other saws that have similar features to this saw that I might have been better off with. We'll see how this lasts long term. But so far so good. Probably the biggest disappointment is this trigger hole for wearing gloves, because you want to use the saw in the winter time. It's like, okay, you're wearing a light pair of leather gloves and suddenly your finger doesn't fit in the hole very well, or you can stuff it in but then it doesn't come back out again. And also the dust port. I don't know why they couldn't get that right. I'm not sure what's so hard about making a dust port, but I guess it doesn't matter a whole lot because I don't really care a whole lot where the sawdust goes as long as it doesn't go into my tool pouch. So it is easily serviceable. Big things, easy access to the brushes. It's easy to take apart. Everything's pretty easy on this saw as far as maintenance goes.